Marvin Gaye Chetwynd, formerly known as Poetics of Chetwynd, is a British artist who was nominated for the Turner Prize in 2012. As an artist, she is best known for her carnivalesque live performances featuring homemade costumes, props and sets, and a varying troupe of collaborators, friends and family. Marvin Gaye will be staging a new performance here, which is very exciting, in a couple of weeks on the 7th of February, so those of you who haven't booked, I would encourage you to do so. It will be a really fantastic evening. Recent solo exhibitions include Odd Man Out at Sadie Cole's and Homemade Tasers at the New Museum in New York. And it's a very great pleasure to introduce and welcome Sara Jane Bailes, who will be joining Marvin Gaye in conversation this afternoon. Sara Jane is a reader in Theatre and Performance Studies at Sussex University. She holds an MA and a PhD from the Tisch School of Arts in New York in the Department of Performance Studies. She is the author of Dear Participant, Training, Rehearsal and Response in the Work of Goat Island Performance Group and Francis Elite, and Performance Theatre and the Poetics of Failure. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to our two speakers, and we will have some time for questions from the audience at the end. So, we'll have all of our questions. So, hand over to you guys. Thanks very much for coming.
Okay, great. So, the mic is the level okay for everybody with the microphone? Okay, great. If there's any feedback, it's going to be taken care of, I'm sure. So, it's a really great pleasure actually to be here today with Marvin Gaye, whose work I didn't really Marv. She said I could call him Marv. His work, it's funny, the Turner Prize, I remember going in 2012 to Take Britain to see the nominees, and I remember arriving there, and I was kind of excited because I write about performance, and my background is in theatre, but experimental theatre, installation, and the work I'm interested in. I've always taught the historical avant-garde and the contemporary avant-garde, but I was a performer myself, so in the 80s and the 90s, but always in experimental performance rather than plays, so the kind of work, I suppose, that is closer to things like happenings. So when I went along to the Tate, I was really interested to see your work, because the thing that I'd heard about it was that this was the first time there was a performance artist which I find that really strange, that came up again and again, that you were a performance artist, and it was the first time that there was a performance artist who was nominated. And so when I arrived, I wandered around and I missed your performance. There was I think a performance was taking place several times a day, so I completely missed it. I saw all the other work, and I spent a lot of time kind of wandering around the debris of your performances, or the stuff that is your performances, but I never saw them animated. So I was really curious about about the way that you bring performance together in your work. Which aspect of it you identify as being? Do you identify as being performative? Is it? And I wondered, is it for you the aftermath? Is it the actual thing itself when the performance event takes place? Where is the performance located in your work?
When it takes place.
When it takes place.
For sure.
And what's the rest then? What's everything else that you build around that event? Is that the preparation for it? Is that the start of it? Where does the objective begin in your work?
Also, for me, very clearly and very simply, it's the moment when you're ready to, when you make a recipe and the thing is cooked and it's ready to be eaten. It's like it's at the moment of the eating, at the moment when the live action happens. That's what I would say, if I'm understanding what you're asking. Oh dear. Oh dear. And the... Oh dear. Yes, I think the embarrassing thing I don't know, you don't choose the labels, do you? They get put on you.
Yeah.
So if I'm being called a performance artist, how you are teased is that even if I take off my jumper and put my coat on, it's a performance. So anything I do is considered somehow performative. Even if I try and give a talk or present my work in a lecture, or in a form that would be seen to be a conventional lecture, I'm seen to be performing. So I can't, if I get to say, I will answer you very simply and say, no, of course it's when we're actually dancing around in costumes and everything's coming together. That's the performance moment, if that's, or that's the moment of action, whatever. But if you're asking someone else, they will say something more complicated in the gesture of how I make the products or the costumes and sets would be a beginning of the performance. So I understand what you're asking me, but I'm quite straightforward, and I would answer you simply and say the moment of action.
So for example, something like brain bug?
Yes.
Okay, so brain bug over... Is it possible to just, Brain bug over there, when I came into the gallery yesterday, brain bug was moving and brain bug was animated in some way, but only a little bit. And then it was really interesting actually, because Chrome Hoof, it is Chrome Hoof, isn't it? The band who played last night, who were extraordinary. While I was here and brain bug was moving a little bit, the band all came in. In fact, and you came over and we were standing there, and there was an incredible performance actually, but a kind of improvised, but it wasn't planned, where Chrome Hoof all came in their costumes. They're kind of, how would you describe their costumes? 70s, 80s? How would you describe their look?
Kind of soggy glamour.
Soggy glamour, yeah, with a kind of futuristic, a kind of lo-fi futuristic ambition. And 10 or 11 of them came in and they were stood in front, and you didn't know, I liked it actually, you couldn't tell what was part of your performance, your piece, Brain Bug, and what was just them, and what was meant to be happening and what wasn't meant to be happening. So intentionality is really interesting. Like with Brain Bug, I couldn't really tell what Brain Bug was doing, whether what we were supposed to do with Brain Bug. And looking at Brain Bug, I can't figure out when I look at that work, is that made for a performance? Is that made as a sculpture? Is it made primarily for a performance and then it becomes a sculpture? I mean, that's some of I'm interested in that in your work. What you set out intending it to do. So when I look at the paws lined along the wall, the cat paws, are they created to be in a gallery to begin with?
No, I can answer you
Not
clearly.
at all.
I know how to answer your question. It's helpful. I understand what you're asking. I know by talking about the group called Gelatin. Does everyone know Gelatin?
No.
I think that you don't know. Alex is shaking his head. Okay. I think I'll say some small sentence about Gelatin. If I get it wrong and someone knows more, can you say? But I think they're from Austria. They're all men. They're loads of fun. They do crazy things like cut holes in their trousers and let their balls hang out. And they make huge kind of installations of almost like sort of crazy wooden worlds. One was like a amphitheatre that they then filled with bananas, I think. There's lots of other examples, but maybe you can say something too about them, or I don't know.
I don't know them.
Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
They do that big rabbit.
Yes, that's Gelatin. So I like Gelatin. When I was at college, I was very excited about them. I can tell you my personal story. There was a big, lumpy kind of dome made out of fake fur with holes in it that were my arm height. So I went and put my arm into the hole, thinking you were meant to do that. But I found out afterwards that they had fucked the holes and come in them. So into the fake fur holes. So they're kind of macho, wild, kind of exciting.
Like the Viennese actionists, actually. Macho and wild, but in a very different way.
The thing that I've got a little bit more disillusioned by learning about them more was that they're quite clever in making their performances not prioritize the live moment, but actually they prioritize the design of the thing for the aftermath, the thing that's left as the residue or the product afterwards. And I found it, it's not that I was so disillusioned, because they're still wild and exciting and macho, but the part that I found disillusioning was that for me it's not what I'm about. I didn't relate to it because I'm about the sacrifice for the live moment. So if I was making something happen, I'm not thinking about the product afterwards. The product afterwards barely lasts on its legs until the end of the time I've made it to last.
Because it's been so poorly made, would you say?
Or not poorly made. I'd say made impatiently with lust for life. but if
But
it's,
poorly made isn't an evaluative judgment for me. Poorly made as in lo-fi and put together quickly and made with the materials that are to hand.
yes,
That's
bricoleur,
what
I
mean.
agree. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
poor is such a bad word, but all I'm trying to get to is really simple. I think everyone knows, and you know already, is that I'm saying I'm the one who would prioritise the moment of excitement of live action. I'm not thinking cleverly about the after. That answers the question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Good. That's good.
I think it does.
I hope so.
So, can I just go back to Brain Bug then? Because
Yes,
Brain
of
Bug
course.
is in here, and I want to talk about some of the things that are in here, because they're a good way.
Intentionality was good. I'd like to talk about that. That's really good. It really helps me, actually. Because
To
someone
think
asked me also about authorship. I'm quite loose about authorship.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with the intentionality of if the Chrome Hoof... I know Chrome Hoof very well. I
Yeah.
used to be a groupie and I've been to
Yeah.
festivals with them. I think they're amazing.
That makes total
They
sense.
used to do huge performative puppetry within their
Yeah.
gigs, which was
Yeah.
incredible. They had a big sort of glittery ram
Yeah.
that almost collapsed on you and you all had to go hoof, hoof, hoof. And it was really, really fun. That I know one of the band members really well and they wanted to do a photo shoot, so I thought it was amazing fun. It's like, for me, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's perfect, it's a fun, no problem meeting.
Yeah.
And I don't mind as well the interaction and contribution of audience or when I work with groups of people, I want the contribution of the person. I can make things so far, but I'm always wanting the group problem solving. So I'm very happy to talk about that. I'd be interested to talk about that. It might make me understand things more.
What, intentionality?
Yeah, or anything like that. I'm happy to.
Yeah, well, just with when I see Brain Bug, so I can't figure out, what's the performance that Brain Bug does? Because isn't there going to be a performance in the gallery?
It's for Alex Farquharson's initiated that I exhibit my work that's seen to be like supposedly a shell for something that was more full when it was in action. So there they are, they're the props or the costumes or whatever. But rather than them being exhibited as dead things or as unanimated, at points they'll be brought to life. But I would literally be dead if I had to animate all of them. It's too exhausting for me. At the moment, I'm already very tired from just trying to hold together the things that I've had to make happen for the show. So I'm animating one of the big objects, which is the Brain Bug. It could have been that we chose to do the cat bus, but we chose to animate one, because I can't do all of them if everyone understands that. It's too exhausting.
But they all potentially have an animated life.
Yes, and
absolutely
I can explain.
Great.
The Brain Bug has a very romantic, full-blown ritual and dance with music and a lot of... It's very romantic, in my opinion. Do you know the Powell and Pressburger film called The Tales of Hoffmann? It's very rich in colour because it's Technicolor. And at the beginning there's a ballet that's the Dance of the Dragonfly, I think. And it has really a clever mixture of theatre and cinema. There's a kind of brilliant meshing at that time almost of theatre and cinema. And I wanted to reference that, so I took some of the ideas of the costumes. So they have like almost like dragonfly patterns on them, and they're all wearing quite pastely colours. And some of the music I've taken from this very early film of Midsummer Night's Dream that's black and white, and it has Mendelssohn's soundtrack. And I can do them for you. It's like this, it's things like this. And we're talking grown men doing that. And other movements are sort of like full crouching down on your hands and knees and banging on the floor all together as a group. So it feels very like a cult ritual dance. And a lot of the other movements I got, which I can show you as well, is very strange. It's smearing your body down and then going onto the floor and rolling on the floor and then rolling over and being like a sort of bug like that on your back. So they're from some other strange contemporary interpretations of the Rite of Spring. So there's a big mix of choreography, beautifully romantic gesture, hopeful lifting of the spirits to a more romantic place, music from the very nice Harry Belafonte song shake signora, but played plaintively on one flute. So it's all like ready for, you know, some sort of engagement. And of course, if you're a hard-nosed audience, like we received in New York, the people in the audience,
They won't laugh.
they said, "Work it, baby, work it." When we were like sort of literally going.
But I don't understand.
hard.
Wait, work it, baby. But they were saying that sarcastically or support?
Sarcastically.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what to say. Yes, there's a definite contribution from the audience that matters, and then there's also a level of, what was the word you used? That was really good. Beginning with an I.
Intentionality.
Yes. That my intention is actually genuinely to be romantic.
Yeah.
But the
So it's not parody.
The result is not. It's that the world is full of very hard-nosed people, and actually, when I try to lift off with my romance or humour and gesture, it usually lands, and playfulness, good, totally agree. It usually lands kind of nastily in some sort of cowpad.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that actually is quite tragic, and that in another way weirdly comes through as being quite refreshing.
Yeah.
In the oddest way.
Yeah.
Which I know slightly links to the chapters in your
Yeah,
analysis.
work on failure. Well, I mean, I think the thing that's really interesting about your work that's really different to a lot of the contemporary theatre groups I've written about, where I've tried to kind of talk about, in their work I talk about the failure of representation, not the representation of failure. Because when I say to people I write about failure and performance, everybody sort of says, oh yeah, I've seen a really bad performance too, and that's not at all what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an interest from, in my book I write about it from the 80s onwards, in a lot of theatre performance to deal with the failure of representation. That is, to deal with the fact that in theatre you don't have special effects, you don't have lots of money, you can't make it look sophisticated and incredible and real. And there's a quote actually that I like that you said you can't make it real, but you can make it something else. And it's this, and something else is so broad. There's something else you can make it. It's so broad. So why try and mimic or recreate reality all the time? So in theatre practice, I think it's been fantastic since the 80s because lots of groups have had fun with the failure of representation, with being underwhelming on stage, with things degrading, with things falling apart, with things not going well, with there being chaos, but it's structured chaos. And that's the thing, of course it's structured chaos, otherwise it's kind of bad failure. There's bad failure and good failure, I think. But with a lot of the work I write about, it's deeply ironic, and so that kind of cynicism is in there. And what I find interesting in your work, and I don't know if it's, I'm trying to figure it out, I don't know if it's because there isn't a cynicism, or I don't feel...
No, there isn't any. You're right.
Yeah,
you're
you
right.
need to get some. I feel like there's you need to protect yourself. No, it's incredible because there isn't that cynicism, and I think that's quite, maybe that's difficult for people to deal with when they're looking at something without an ironic or a cynical filter, because it's difficult to know how to meet the work as an adult, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know what, if you know.
No, I do know what you mean, because it's quite obviously that children don't have a problem. I know what you're saying. I don't know what the answer is. I feel like I'm not going to be ashamed of myself. It's like pointless. But I do feel like maybe the older I get, I will become more cynical or something. But it hasn't happened yet.
And there's an interesting mismatch, or not mismatch, but tension in your work, which I think Alex talked about a little bit last night when he was introducing your work, that I wonder if you can talk about, and that is that the materials and the look and the feel of the materials is very naive and thrown together and rough and provisional looking, and has that kind of DIY lo-fi aesthetic. But then within the works, there's this really, really elaborate network and layering of references and ideas and characters that reminds me quite a lot of certain outsider artists.
Okay.
Like, it made me think, not that the aesthetic of your work is like Henry Darger or Darger, but people say it both ways. But those really elaborate worlds that Daja created with the Vivian girls and I can't remember the really long elaborate title of his works, but he wrote 15,000 books worth of, when he died, they found all these extensive catalogue books of the adventures of the Vivian girls who had a child slave rebellion, and then the paintings that he paints are these magnificent, colourful, beautiful, kind of liberating, but also very violent at the same time. So within your work too, there are these really intricate worlds, and they're fantasy worlds, and they're worlds from literature, and characters that come from literature and anime and all over the place.
Yes.
So I think that's a really interesting tension, the kind of apparent simplicity of things, the apparent simplicity when we come in here and very simple shapes, but really, really elaborate worlds going on inside of them. So that was something that I find interesting, and I wondered if you could talk about that in some way.
I do know, because I was just talking to my dad, and he didn't understand what the boxes behind us are about.
Diorama.
Yes, the diorama. And for me, the diorama.
Which you go past on a chair, which is a fantastic idea, but I didn't dare do it because nobody else was doing it.
Now, as it's presented here, you can put the headphones on and do it yourself on the chair, listening to one of the introductions that's happened before. Or I think it's going to be possibly animated at various times where you are two people sort of like push you along and instruct you on the health and safety of the office chair first, and then allow you to enjoy the different world views. But I can just really quickly tell you, because apparently no one knows, and it is an example of the intricate world as you're describing. I'm sure you probably wouldn't know by looking at it that it's all about Nicola Tesla's electricity and famous crazy life.
All of them are.
Yes, they all are, because I found his life story. I don't know, does everyone know Nicola Tesla? Nicola Tesla. There's an electric car that's been brought out called the Tesla, which is named after, it's after him. And it's one of those things when you start, when you research, or if anyone studies physics, they'd immediately know about him. But he's really, really, really famous, as is Edison, who was famous and synonymous with electricity. He was at the same time as Edison. He's from Serbia. He emigrated to America. He worked for Edison for a small amount of time, and then through jealousy, because Nikola Tesla was actually incredibly talented but had no business sense, whereas Edison was less talented but had an extremely good business sense. There's a wonderful expose of how the world works in their parallel careers, and the story is so extraordinary and enchanting and like an opera, how do you say, epic, that it's such a wonderful story that I wanted to make a piece of work about it. So that's always what happens to me, is I'm researching something, you trip upon some piece of information, and you just can't believe how exciting the information is, and it's interesting that people don't necessarily know it. It's not as commonplace as you'd think it would, because it's so brilliant that you sort of think, God, how doesn't everyone know about this story? And I can give you a little example. For example, Edison publicly electrocuted an elephant. It's AC/DC, the band. It's electric current against, direct current against whatever the other one is, but alternating. Thank you. You know all about it. You're sitting there in the front row. And then all I was going to say, and I know Jim would definitely, but all I'm trying to get to, without sounding too awful, is that Edison did these quite extraordinary stunts by, for example, electrocuting an elephant. It's really shocking.
Yeah, there's film footage of it. It's really
amazingly, not barbaric, maybe it's too much, but pretty below the belt punches. I don't know.
Over-ambitious, in fact, is what it is too.
Over-ambitious. Yeah. But it was successful. And another thing, for example, Nikola Tesla's successful things where he galvanized, what's the right word? He not galvanized, but he harnessed the energy from Niagara Falls through hydroelectric motors to power the whole of the electricity of Buffalo City. And he also powered Chicago's World Fair for the electricity. So he was actually, there were moments where he did meet up with business and have success within his lifetime. But the real tragedy of it is that he invented supposedly, or not invented, but knew how to tap the free electricity that's in the ionosphere, or this realm of the globe that has an amazing amount of electrons that we could all be living off for free. But the irony of the story is that the tower that he was building, the funding was pulled on it because the man who was trying to fund his research wanted to market it, and when he found out that the electricity would be for everyone for free forever, he couldn't make it into a package to market it, and therefore pulled the funding. And I know I'm not saying that very well, but hopefully you've understood what I was trying to say. Have you? Yes. Okay, so the story is that he ended in a sort of, he died alone in a hotel room in New York, kind of boo-hoo-hoo, and the other boxes are all about ludicrous things that people talk about, and you can't believe they are talking about it, like dinosaurs being alive at the same time as people, for example, is the first box. Okay. The second box is crazed women in New York on the rampage at night time, pushing cars off car parks and having sex with strangers.
Is that the one with all the little red figures on the white?
That's the second one. That's the car park.
Okay.
And then the third one is chimpanzees and humanzees living in harmony together and chimpanzees and humans living together and producing humanzees, which there's a documentary about. And the third one is Aztec pyramids being in Australia through aliens, obviously. And then there are all these like stupid urban myths or ridiculous stories, but then when you get to the last box talking about Tesla's exciting life, it's this wonderful realization of sort of this brilliant story that is true. And then there was a homemade taser that you could electrocute yourself with if you wanted. All I was going to get to which goes back to intentionality, and maybe the discussion goes back to being a good discussion.
It is a good discussion.
I'd explain, is that I allowed this is my version of the boxes, but you would not know that probably. And then I allowed anyone else of my group to add their interpretation. So their story was totally different.
Yeah.
They said that Tesla was going to come in half an hour later and he'd be telling his own version about electricity that day. So they were really irreverent. My earnest desire to communicate the truth was thrown out the window, and they had loads of fun just telling any real rubbish. They said that the next one along the box was that dinosaurs still lived on Earth, and skyscrapers were designed to hurt the dinosaurs' shoulders when they walked past. And I mean, it just was ridiculous. All the information Chinese whispered into nonsense, and that was that.
Okay. So when you go along on the chair, what you're listening to is their different versions. Okay,
yes.
That's great.
Yes.
So lots of layerings of narrative onto the already kind of...
Exactly.
But they're quite subterranean in a way, aren't they, your narratives, is what I'm thinking, within the work.
What's that mean?
Subterranean, they're underground, they're very... I feel I'm already saying I always feel, and I've only really been inside of your work for 2 days, but it does feel very subterranean, as if the meanings are very... I don't know if hidden, but they've really sunken down in lots of different sedimented ways into it. So I wouldn't know what they are. Not that I need to know what they are. I mean, I was walking around earlier and just writing down the names because I thought it's really difficult to know how to describe them or what to call them. And it doesn't help me if I know the names, for example. So like Jabba the Hutt, Jabba the Hutt. I don't know what that is. And everybody else does. I mean, there's a book, right? Lots of people do. But you have to know the references, right? You would have to know the references. But they already mean something, just as they are. But I'm just saying that the complexity of meaning, it belies the apparent naivety and innocence of the objects themselves.
I can answer what you're saying. I know that this is very simple, is that I don't underestimate my audience. I think that everyone is highly analytical and highly sophisticated in processing advertising and life in general, and that if I was going to make a piece of work that I wanted to communicate the idea, if I was trying to communicate, I wouldn't have to spell it out. It's almost more that I'm playing a fun puzzle and I know that everyone else understands what I'm doing. Yeah. That's how I feel, confidently I feel that.
Yeah. Can I just go back to something you said my group? So do you work, can you talk a little bit about your process and your process of making pieces and making performances? I just want to go back a little bit to the performances because I'm interested in your relationship with the performing. Did you used to perform in them? I think you did.
No, I still do.
You still do?
Yeah.
Okay. And who is your group, and how does your group evolve? Who are the people in the group?
Well,
and are they people who are always performers, or are they non-performers?
They're people who are not necessarily professional, so they're non-performers, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, I would definitely tell you, no problem.
Some water.
No, I've got some really horrible cough where it feels like you're dying of asbestos poisoning. You know those coughs where you can't breathe?
Yeah.
It's really odd. You feel like...
Yeah.
So that's warming my life at the moment. I will answer your question. It's simple. My group is now, must be a 15-year-long heritage or something. What do you call it? Gang of experience working together. It's very, very loose. It's like anyone that I have a conversation with where we see eye to eye and we get excited about the ideas, I'll think about the conversation afterwards and I'll then think, I want to do something about that idea, that germ of that grain of excitement.
Yeah.
I'll go back to the person, even if I haven't worked with them before in any way. I'll just go back to them and say, what do you think about this idea? Do you think we could do this about it? Do you think we could make it into a mime? What do you think about having a party about it? Or
a party about it.
Something about along those lines.
Yeah.
And then to my, level of expectation, because the conversation was a good one, like it was two-way. They also want to. It's not that I'm at that point like going away cold. It's that they've responded saying they'd love to, and they went away as well thinking about the ideas. So then you sort of feel excited, and you try it with other people, or other friends that you've worked with before. For example, you'll say, "Oh, I'm working on this idea at the moment. What do you think?" And it starts falling into place before you've even sort of tried. And I had this very strange experience more recently where things I make very, for long periods of time, over 3 months. The cat bus took me 6 months to make.
Yeah.
So there's a long, dogged, boring, sober, hard-working grind to making some of the costumes and props. But the thing that's odd about it is once they're made, it feels as if they always existed. There's a really strange, I can't really describe it. It does sound like I'm an outside artist. It does sound a bit like being like Richard Dad or something, saying that the fairies were on the canvas before I painted them. There's definitely those qualities are there. That style or that way of thinking it's in place in me.
Yeah.
But very simply, to talk about the group, it could be anyone I talk to, because I have strangely little boundary. So it could be someone I talk to at a bus stop, and genuinely, it really does happen to me that I meet people, and I don't have any quality control. It seems in many ways I'll have a good conversation with someone, they'll agree with me, they're in. There's no further
there's no filtering process. So,
and actually there is a filtering process,
there
but
is.
by the group I have totally noticed that if there's a real nutter, the group elbow them out. It's not me.
And are they people who mainly are from some kind of an art practice or not necessarily?
Often it is through my now it used to be me being at college. And now, because I'm older and I'm doing teaching jobs, weirdly it is actually the students I'm teaching quite often now. So there's definitely an art college connection or art trained connection. But also there are people who I randomly meet anywhere who don't have art backgrounds.
And do you ever think about your work being, I can't imagine it strangely enough, but do you think about your work being housed in theatres? Or why for you does it belong in galleries?
It's not that it belongs in galleries, that's hilarious to think that way around. But I know what you're saying, because when I read the wall text, it's interesting, it's because I have exhibited recently in many galleries, that therefore it seems as if I am a gallery artist or something like that. I did think that when I read the wall text, I thought, oh, that's so complicated, I can't even begin to try to change it. But the piece of work I made called The Walk to Dover was a really important piece of work for me, because it was a walk, it was not in a gallery, it was me walking in the countryside, and I realised how much land art had influenced me.
Yeah.
And how much sort of I'm influenced by that totally art college textbook, the O'Doherty book of Inside the White Cube, and I'm rejecting the White Cube hilariously, although we're sitting in a very, very white room at the moment. I would say that I like working on the same floor space as the people who would be coming to engage or join in. So I find the stage really difficult. I find the raised platform very difficult for me.
And the framing, the proscenium arch. Yeah.
I've tried it. I really like theatre in the round. I love Japanese theatre, Bertolt Brecht, and I love street theatre. Anything I come across, I like
immersive theatre now. I mean, because
probably don't know. I like the Worcester Group very much.
Yeah, absolutely. The book's all about the Worcester Group.
And Today's Cantor as well. To be honest, I find it so exciting, experimental theatre. I just think I'm sad that it's not as confrontational as it was in the 70s.
I think it's really confrontational actually now.
But now?
Yeah, I think there's lots of confrontational work.
It doesn't feel like life is to me.
Life isn't confrontational.
It doesn't feel like it has the same
urgency.
People are not trying to be so... Yeah, exactly. They're not acting as immediately with their reactions.
But I think there have been lots of developments that are interesting for your work, in thinking about your work. And they are, I think theatre's now been, performance has really been influenced by rave culture and immersive theatre and big club environments. So
they're massive.
They're massive, but companies like Punch Drunk, have people here seen Punch Drunk or no Punch Drunk's work?
Yes.
Who they're very mainstream now, but they didn't start, that people don't start and then they become absorbed by the mainstream. But taking over big warehouses out in the docklands, shipping people out to the performance spaces, and then what you wander around a building and you don't know who the performer is, you don't know who's a performer, who's not a performer, there's no division at all in the space, and you're in a thoroughly immersive environment for 2 hours. And some people like that, some people find it really disconcerting. The other end of work from that at the moment, I think, is one-on-one performance. So it's just in a performance, very intense.
Tina Segal. Actually, I wouldn't mind asking you about this is quite public suddenly, but the Turner Prize the next year had Tina Segal in it.
Yeah.
But he's like the most amazing performance artist ever. I don't understand it. Like, they put me in the one before saying, we've never had a performance artist, and here she is, this one, we'll do this one. And then the next year, they get one of the most international art star performance artists. It's insane to me. Why didn't they do
kind of backwards.
him? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then they didn't even give it to him.
No.
It's really odd. Does anyone understand what I'm talking about? Do you find it odd? Just as a... Do you find it odd?
You take credit for it.
What does that mean?
You got them interested, and then they
Do you think so?
Yeah. I mean, I think
they can't be that slow.
But it's also about the times. I think what's shifting is, I think what's opening out again in the art world, as it did in the 60s and 70s, is the Tate has now got the tanks and performance and is paying much more attention to performance. So performance within galleries is happening a lot more. I think that's probably why. I'm really aware of the time. I had no idea it was 1:45. And so I think we should probably open it out to people for questions, because I'm
Does that mean we've been enjoying ourselves?
That means we've been enjoying
ourselves.
We've been enjoying ourselves. I haven't barely got going, but I'm going to write to you because I've got lots of things to ask you.
Sounds great.
I would like to open it out to people for any kind of questions or observations, things like that, if anyone wants to. Yes.
In this booklet, you say you make an enthusiastic reference to Glenn Baxter.
Yes, that's interesting.
Glenn Baxter seems like someone who reins in his painterly side. His style, he restricts what he does visually. That's one thing. If you're talking about a framed picture, I'm wondering if you're doing the same thing. There's been several references to your lo-fi aesthetic. Is there something similar that you do, where you have to say, no, those tables look a bit slick. Let's put some cardboard feet on them encourage the lo-fi aesthetic. Is this line deliberately?
No, I didn't. To unhinge the
Yes,
slickness.
because if it was smooth and sharp-edged, it would be too slick for your lo-fi aesthetic.
It's really different. I think I understand. I love Glenn Baxter. My parents are here, and they brought me up looking at the books and enjoying his humour, like passing the dandruff. It would be amazing. so no problem with Glenn Baxter. But it's really difficult for me at this point. And oh god, I was going to sound really grand. I was going to say, do you know like people like Ingmar Bergman? I got the, when you buy a DVD now, they've got the sort of extra bits on the DVD, and I watched an interview with Ingmar Bergman. It's 3 hours, so he takes his time to like tell you stuff.
Of course he does, he's Ingmar.
It's definitely worth watching all 3 hours. But within the 3 hours, you learn a lot. I didn't understand he was exiled at one point. Also, I had no idea, to be honest. But during his life, the Seventh Seal, which I obviously really, really love, and it has the troupe that are in a wagon that are performing like folk plays within that. I find it very enchanting. And he's in his biography, he's still reasonably religious at that point, and it's at a turning point where he's becoming disillusioned, and then later in his career he makes the more sort of like Persona, the films that are psychologically harrowing. But the thing I was trying to not be long-winded about saying is I might come to some crisis as I'm 40 now. I turn 40 in the summer, and it might be that I do become more cynical and more complicated in how I choose, and what's the I word again?
Intentionality.
Have an intention. It might be that I'm at some horrible, terrifying turning point where I'm not going to be this fresh upstart anymore. So I can only answer you by saying that, but in honesty, I don't think about what I'm doing. I'm not calculating to say, I want this to look more fucked up. I'm not thinking, I want the lo-fi in the high art world. I'm not thinking anything like that. What I'm thinking is, I want this to look exciting. I want this to happen. And those tables are terrible. What can I do? Maybe I can make them look more like Louis Cans if I put the cardboard feet on. It's like throwing a party, and it's just this sort of stupid, genuine hospitality urge I have. And there might be a level where it's analysed to death, and I'm told till I'm sick of it so much that I have intentional amateurism and all these things. It's so difficult to me to listen to it. I sort of think, it's not true. It's like crazy that I have to think about it. And it will turn me into being conscious enough to, what's the I word? Oh my God. Have an intention. And I will get to some horrible Bergman 3-hour video when I'm nearly at the end of my life, and I'll be saying, well, it was in the early days when I made things with that rashness. I think. Long-winded answer. Okay.
That's great. Anybody else? No, go ahead, and then
I remember reading Inside the White Cube.
I can't hear you.
I remember reading Inside the White Cube.
Oh yeah, good.
And
I like reading it too.
there's a bit that impressed me about the scale of things, but it was kind of being high up and looking down. And when you're at a distance from something, it's less pressure on you because it's far away. It's like history is more comfortable because it's far away.
Yes, I agree with that.
And with the scale of these, did you think about that at all, or did it just happen? Because
No, I didn't. But I understand what you're saying. With I have to say, I didn't realise that the brain bug is sexual looking. It's really embarrassing. I thought the brain bug was just okay, and then other people pointed out to me that it looks like it's so sexual, and the same thing. I didn't understand it so ugly either. But with these, I wasn't thinking of anything as you're saying. I was trying to make like a museum diorama. You know how you see in museums, you see cave people walking around, or some very elaborate room that's turned into a marsh with a bird in it. I was trying to make an environment. But you're right, they do have scale. Oh, great. That's great. That sounds exciting.
They're also like models for theatre, you know, set designs
Yes, it's
for theatre.
true.
They're really beautiful.
I have my Oscar-winning mother in the room. BAFTA-winning mother.
And
Can I just ask you something? Previous question. Can you remind David Ferris asking a question about the hat shop? Because that's really bad.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I can tell her. I don't know, we've got 2 minutes or something.
yeah, we got, because there was another question as well, but yeah, I think
I
got
was
time.
given a commission by a French company that makes satellites, and it's taken me 4 years to not be intimidated to actually complete the commission. But to begin with, I was very intimidated by it because they're so powerful and impressive making these satellites. But the brief was vertical vision rather than horizontal vision, because the satellite's obviously looking down on the world. And after 4 years of worrying, I've made a puppet film that's involving a hat shop, but the whole view is from very far away and vertical. I think that's why my mum was thinking of it. I've only just made it, and it's called Vision Verticale. But it's coming out on February 21st in France. So I think that's why my mum's talking about it, because it has a very distant and close-up scale. The scale is in it.
yeah. And there was a question back there.
You said that you don't underestimate your audience, and you say that you don't really like or want to resist the white cube space. So I'm just wondering who you think your audience, or who your audience is.
My people. Oh, it's such a hard one. I think when I'm doing tutoring now, because I'm so grown up, I do think it's a really good question to ask people about who the hell are they actually making art for? Like, is it? And then some of them say my mum. It's like really quite strange, the answers. If I'm making it for my mum, no wonder I'm working so hard. Definitely. I'm trying to impress her. But hopefully I am. But there's a level where I think audience it's meant to be anyone, isn't it? It's not meant to be elitist, it's meant to be anyone in my audience. I don't think it is so... I could just say people with a sense of humour. There you go. Does it answer? Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, there's someone.
I have a question. Hi.
Vision Verticale. Hello.
I just wanted to ask you about your relationship to gender.
Okay, interesting. Wow, that is a good question, isn't it? Oh, is that it?
Well,
Just bring in the other word.
can elaborate. I'm not sure how
You're
well
going to get
to
away
elaborate.
with it.
But
I'm
thinking about your comments earlier about gelatin being macho and not being exciting, and about the performance next door with the kind of sexy girls, but just girls looking at
the one in the helmet.
yeah, and then the girls being, destroying the car park. I mean, it's this kind of. It seems like it might be borrowed from kind of like science fiction, really bad science fiction, like.
No, it's true. I definitely have a warped. I have a warped. My parents are here, so they can back me up. I have a warped. What do you call it? Perverse upbringing and thinking that. I think I was brought up to think that brothels were meant to be fun. Does that sort of answer it? It is true. It is true. Do you know what I mean? Like jolly, ha ha ha. Let's go and have fun. But I think hang on. There's so much chance. I suddenly bounced into my head something that you said earlier. That are the things meant to be animated, and I think we've made a bit of an effort by putting some of the videos from the props in front of them. So people coming to see the show should slightly get the impression that there was a moment when these things were doing something, and they're not just sculptures. That's one thing I thought just jumped into my head. About gender, I can answer something I found really interesting. I think it's called a lady fest I went to, which they pop up everywhere. It's like ladies women organising talks and discussions for themselves, and I screened a documentary about the Ghibli Studios, the Japanese anime company that made, for example, Totoro, My Neighbor, and I was only asking a question very cunningly. I wasn't saying any point of view. I was only asking of what did people think of these films, and the answer was really simple. You could summarize it very quickly. Girls from 35 up were excited to see that there were female characters that were heroes, and the girls from 35 that were younger were angry that those girls were sexualized, that they were sort of wearing sort of saucy little mini-skirts. Does that make sense? So the girls who were 35 and older, I was in that gang, we were just so grateful to have any representation of a woman, like on the screen, like doing something exciting, like driving an aeroplane or something. And the other girls were just like, it's not good enough. They're disgusting, those short skirts. Like, it was a whole like meaty discussion.
Wait, that was the older?
The young girls were asking for more.
Yeah.
They were asking that the female representation was not sexualized. Does that make sense? Sexualized, like saucy. Whereas I was perfectly happy that they were saucy. I was just happy that they were also quite gung-ho, like dynamic. And I don't know how to answer your question quickly because that's why I was laughing. It's like a huge question. I'd really like to be in a situation where I had brilliant feminist friends giving me good advice all the time. That's what I'd like.
Sweden, they're starting to rate all their films about gender content.
They're starting to rate.
Rate the film to their gender content. So if you've got a woman talking about a man, that's like a minus point. If you've got a woman and then a woman talking about their own lives, and that's like a plus point.
And on the film outside, you can see these points.
Yeah, on the back of videos or films.
I think that's really regressive because then that starts to fix gender more than ever and send us back to thinking in gender determinations and sexual. We need Judith Butler to come in and reveal. But that does seem funny to get into kind of categorising and ratings of them in a way. But I think gender and sexuality is really interesting in your work. Like there's tones of sexuality in almost everything I feel when I walk around, especially the Green Door. Is it the Green Door?
The Green Room.
The Green Room.
The specially commissioned piece.
Yeah, but could we end with a little word
For
about
Nottingham
that?
Contemporary.
Because I went back to that about 4 times because I especially love that song. In fact, I Shazammed it so that I can.
Which is it?
Megadeth. Yeah,
It's Megadeth good by 1,000 times.
Yeah,
It's so good.
it's amazing. Can you talk a little bit about that film and what that film is? And narrative's very interesting in that film. I don't know if when the sound is up.
I can say proudly, it's the new piece of work that I'm making for Nottingham Contemporary. Nottingham Contemporary's funded it, so I'm extremely privileged to be able to be doing experimental films in the caves here that are amazing, absolutely brilliant. And the narrative is about debt counselling. You probably never know that the rocks that they're carrying are meant to be representing people's debt problems, whether it's eviction through mortgage, not paying your mortgage, or whether it's credit card cancellation. I'm not looking anyone in their eyes when I'm saying these things. Debt counselling. And then I don't know if it is sexual, but what it is meant to be is a group of people who have made their own fun and made their own cult, I guess would be the right word, where they are pretending to have died and bring themselves back to life as cat people. So they're just having a load of fun, dressing up, romping around in caves, and they're, how this is going to sound so problematic that I say this, but you know how terrorists and suicide bombers have importance to their life? They make their lives incredibly important by doing these terrifying things and awful things. Well, I was hoping that rather than getting to the stage of terrorism, that you could just do some more homemade cult that's very expressive and a load of fun and very communicative, and it gives your life purpose and meaning, rather than it becoming so intensely sad. If you're feeling your life's been taken away from you by, not having the job you wanted, or rather than wanting to kill someone, you could actually just want to dress up and romp around in a cave. Does it make sense? Yeah. That's the ideas behind
in some costumes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that a little bit of what we're seeing is that story.
Yeah, exactly.
And the people going into the cave are going there with their debts to Okay.
There is a dialogue. It's to be honest, we only filmed it like on 10th of January.
Yeah.
So it's been quite exhausting. I've been editing it in the evenings after installing the film.
Right.
So I've tried to get it as best I could. And I found the music really strange. I tried to do the dialogue, but I found when I put the music for the performance on 7th of February onto the film, it weirdly seemed to tell the story enough. It was like a strange subconscious or subterranean communication skill with intention.
And so when does the film will it be shown here? Does it get shown in full?
Oh, that's a dangerous question.
Right.
It's in full on 7th of February in its own right for the event that I'm doing. It's called the Green Room, and it's going to be a very bombastic event with Star Wars holiday special as an event in one part of the room, Cat Temple extravaganza in the other side of the room.
Right.
It's all quite elaborate.
Fantastic. And that's taking place here on the 7th. And it's streaming live, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think I saw that because I can't come back to Nottingham for that, so it would be great to see that live. Okay, well, I suppose I better wrap it up. I could talk to Marvin Gaye Chetwynd forever, actually. It's been a real pleasure coming to Nottingham Contemporary. I'd like to thank Nottingham Contemporary. I think you've got an incredible art gallery here. I'm jealous. I live in Brighton and I didn't think I'd be jealous. And I'm really jealous. It's extraordinary. I think the two exhibitions together are wonderful, and most of all, I'd really like to thank Marvin Gaye. Thanks.